I would like to welcome all those present who have joined us the meeting remotely. Can I remind everyone that the meeting will be broadcast live off the Combined Authority website and will be available for viewing. Can members please make sure that their phones are switched up to silent and remember to turn the microphones off after speaking. Firstly, can I welcome Catherine Fairclough? Welcome, Catherine. I hope you enjoy the meeting.
Thank you.
The Combined Authority Chief Exec to the meeting, who is attending remotely today. Colleagues, I would also like to welcome Jean Greaves on her first meeting of the Audit and Government Committee, following the confirmation of her appointment as an independent member of the committee by the Combined Authority recently. Welcome, Jean, and I hope you'll enjoy the meeting. Also, I be aware that the draft of the completion report was considered by the committee in September. Following the completion of the audit completion, Mark Dalton of Mayors, our external audit, is attending the meeting remotely today, and I'd like to invite him to comment briefly on the conclusion of the audit.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to just give you the headline from the late paper. So the committee will be pleased to note that we did issue a clean, unqualified opinion on the Combined Authorities financial statements at the very beginning of November. The letter that has been circulated more latterly provides an update on the matters that we highlighted as outstanding within our audit completion report, which, as you say, Chair, came to the September committee meeting. The letter is really simple in nature. It highlights 5 minor presentational adjustments that arose as we completed our local audit procedures, and also highlights 2 unadjusted misstatements, both of which are well below materiality, and we are content with management's position that they've chosen not to amend the accounts for these non-material matters. We report them to this committee purely for your information and for completeness. So as I say, Chair, the headline very much that we did issue that clean, unqualified opinion on your financial statements. I won't say too much more about the letter. Hopefully it is self-explanatory, but just to say, again, thank you for giving us this opportunity just to confirm that conclusion to the financial statements audit.
Thank you, Mark. Do any members have any comment or questions? Thank you. I'll move to the agenda now. Are there any apologies of absence?
Thank you, Chair. No, we haven't received any apologies.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Have any declarations of interest been received, or would members like to declare any interest on any item of the agenda?
I haven't received any, Chair, just to confirm.
Thank you. Item 3, minutes of the last meeting. The minutes of the previous meeting of the Audit Committee held on the 22nd of September 2021 are included on pages 1 to 4. Can I now ask if the minutes of the last meetings are agreed, please? Thank you. 4, Members' Code of Conduct update. Can I call Jill, Chief Legal Monitoring Officer, to present the report, please?
Say a second name.
Thank you, Chair. Members will be aware that nationally the Local Government Association has promoted a revised Member Code of Conduct. Locally, we worked with the Merseyside, across Merseyside and Cheshire, to see if we could secure commonality in the Code of Conduct that was adopted by the Liverpool City Region Combined Authority, recognising that we are a body that works with 6 constituent authorities. Happily, we were able to reach a conclusion that 4 of the constituent authorities would adopt the same code as the Combined Authority, and the Combined Authority adopted its revised code on the 4th of June this year. Subsequent to that, nationally, the Local Government Association have then promoted a revised version of their code. So we've had to relook at our code here in Merseyside and for the Combined Authority. So taking that into account, we've set out in the report at agenda item 4 the key changes that this means to our code that we're suggesting that members consider. The most significant change is paragraph 7, subsection C of the Annex B concerning prejudicial interests. The wording "your interests" has changed to "the interests." And what that means for members is that it will capture a wider set of interests when you are engaged with the code rather than just your own personal interests. And I think we think that's probably better wording and more reflective of how members operate. So we seek your endorsement of that Merseyside Model Code of Conduct that will then go on to be adopted by the Combined Authority, most likely now at its January meeting, if you are agreeable to that proposal. Just to give you some further information as well, if I may, members, we also are working across Merseyside and Cheshire about how we, once a complaint is made under the code, about how we deal with those complaints. So we're going to suggest a further working group be established. Last time we had 2 members of this committee going forward to assist us with that work in the form of Councillor Whitley and Councillor Pugh, former members of this committee. So again, if we may, Chair, with your indulgence, seek representation either today or subsequently through email. We can agree representation to work with a few key officers to assist with this review of how we deal with member complaints here at the Combined Authority. Again, just to assure members, we're looking to do something across the constituent authorities as well to be as consistent as possible. That's all I propose to say, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions or observations on the report.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Morgan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just as Jill said, if we can remember, a modified version of the Local Governments Association Model Code was adopted by the Combined Authority back in June 2021. And it was also adopted by St Helens, Sefton, Wirral, Merseyside Recycle and Waste Authority and the Fire and Rescue Authority. And Liverpool's adopted the code without any modifications. But just for benefit, Knowsley has been reviewing its own position through the Governance and Audit Committee with a revised code of conduct scheduled to be considered by a full council meeting on the 15th of December. And Knowsley's recommendation for the new code is based on the model code as amended by the monitoring officers and adopted by the other authorities, albeit with minor local amendments. And I used the word local because some of them might be historic and it couldn't all be the same throughout the city region or anywhere else. So I'm just a bit unsure, Chair, if it's okay, and maybe Jill might want to come back, why the monitoring officer for the Combined Authority should feel which is would all the code of conduct should be in the same place. Any discussion of the Knowsley approach to investigating and responding to allegations relating to member conduct will be a matter for Knowsley Council and nobody else. Thanks, Chair.
Happy to pick up on those comments. It's not a mandate in any way, shape or form. It's more just where consistency can be achieved of approach and definition, recognising that our councillors flex across a number of organisations. So some of the organisations that have adopted the code are the ones that do work across the city region. So the Waste Authority, the Fire Authority, the Combined Authority. So we're just trying to make sure that should issues occur, either in the code or in the way that we go about dealing with any complaints thereunder, that we are consistent where that can be achieved. But you know, we're not mandating that in any way, shape or form, and just looking to make it easier for councillors who do work across those different bodies.
Yeah, I'd say thanks for that, but you know, the recommendations can be supported by me, but I'd just like to make it clear is that any business for Knowsley will be for Knowsley, and I don't know if the other authorities will be the same, but I just wanted to make that clear, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morgan. Hi, Councillor Burgess-Joyce.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I do take Councillor Morgan's comment, but I do also accept that the principles are pretty much the same, you know, the balance of probabilities, the evidence that's gathered, and I think that, you know, the Wirral would be particularly open to the Standards Committee being approached by yourself if it hasn't already happened? Because I think the basic tenet of investigating a member is the same across all. It should be the same. It should be the same standards. And so I'm quite supportive of it, even though I do take the point that, you know, local things need to be dealt with locally. But thank you.
Councillor.
It's Mike Wharton.
Oh, sorry,
Chair.
Mike.
It's okay, we haven't met that often, have we? From Holton. I actually agree with Councillor Morgan on this. We'll all have our own different ways of dealing with member complaints. And although we recognise that actually the code of conduct will be very similar right across each of our local authorities, but dealing with member complaints, obviously, if it's a Holton member and it relates to Holton, it would be dealt with by our own members and our own procedures as opposed to being through this body. But I do understand that we are trying to achieve something that is best for us all and to try and get a code of conduct that we can all adhere to. It's a shame in some ways that the government don't adhere to their code of conduct in many ways, isn't it really? But I shall leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any more questions? Can I also ask what Jill has asked if any members would like to put the name forward? Councillor Birch-Joyce and James. Did you want to speak or are you putting your name forward? Okay. Is that okay? Yeah. And Jean, did you have your hand up as well? Oh, sorry. Okay. Thank you. The senior moments are setting in now. Right. Members' Code of Conduct, which we've just done. Internal Audit Update. Can I invite Laura, Head of Internal Audit, to present her report, please?
Thank you, Chair. So this is the routine Internal Audit Update report, which you will be familiar with. It presents to you the results of internal audit work for the period since the last report, which was presented to you at the September meeting, highlights the 7 audits that have been completed in that period, and also gives a review on the recommendations arising from those audits and the organisational risk opinions that were generated from those. The report also gives you a flavour for the performance of the Internal Audit Service as well, so does draw out the point that we are slightly, unfortunately, behind where we would seek to be at this time of year with our completion of the plan, but we are confident that we will continue to recover that position, and we are confident that by the end of Q3 we will have 60% of the plan completed, which is much more in line with where we would want to be. What I would say on that front is that there have been, as is always the case and starts to hit home around this time of year, additional pieces of work that have been requested of us, and those obviously have an impact on the plan as agreed at the start of the year and on our ability to deliver that plan. But that is absolutely right and proper that we should flex the plan accordingly. The report also highlights for you the recommendations arising from the external review that was conducted of the service, which I've spoken to you about previously. So it was very pleasing to find that we were found to be fully compliant with the public sector internal audit standards. There were a few minor recommendations which came out of that, which I've summarised for you in the report, and we're very much on with those. But I'm really happy to take any questions you might have on that. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Councillor Boyce? Joyce, sorry.
Hello, nice to see you. The only sort of concern I had there, Laura, was is anything sort of falling through the cracks? I'm conscious that you mentioned a figure of 60%, which, you'll forgive me, I've been nice so far, but 60% isn't great, if I'm being honest. And I'm wondering if I'm sure you have, but you've rationalised what's the urgent and what's the important. I'm sure you have. Are there any things that are the urgent and important tray that aren't being done that we probably need to know about as a committee? Because clearly we need to support you as best we can if that's possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, the 60% was at the end of Q3, so that's where we were hoping to be. So by the end of the year, what we will do and what we will bring to you at the next meeting is a review of the plan to address exactly the point that you've made in terms of which items have we sacrificed, in inverted commas, in order to undertake those additional pieces of work that we have been requested to do. But everything is done on a risk basis, so it's always about what comes in and what goes, and balancing the risk between those items. I hope to be in a position to be able to issue a full opinion at the end of the year, which means that I feel that I will have covered all of the areas of significant risk across the organisation. Clearly, if I was not going to be in that position, I'll be highlighting that to you as a matter of urgency, and that would obviously then lead to conversations potentially about capacity, etc. But I'm not in that position and not expecting to be. But yes, you can rest assured that that those conversations and discussions are happening on an ongoing basis, and indeed it is natural and indeed desirable that new pieces of work that we perhaps didn't foresee at the start of the year come in, and that we do that constant reprioritisation. So as I say, what I'm proposing to do is at the January meeting bring that sort of formal review of the plan at that 3/4 point of the year, so that you can really see that very, very clearly and be very informed about what has happened.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. That was a lovely answer, Laura. So give us an opinion now as to which one is pressing most of all. Which particular piece of work are you not addressing to your high standards that you should be, in your opinion?
There aren't any that are in my mind at the moment that we're not addressing or have plans to address. Those items that would potentially fall out of the plan would be those at the lower end of the scale in terms of risk. And what we very often would do is obviously put those into next year's plan. So it is a matter of, obviously, we're very compartmentalised in terms of it is a plan for a financial year. But obviously the world doesn't work like that, and obviously assurance is a continuous process and a continuous business. So if we were in a position where there was something that needed to come out, we would look at that again as part of an overall focus on risk, and then consider whether it needed to be included within next year's plan, or whether it was something that, because sometimes there are things that are just naturally superseded. So for example, we had a piece of work in the plan concentrating on a number of items around Brexit. Well, clearly, in terms of the organisation's progress and response to that and the way that things have moved forward, that has become less of a focus and less of an issue. So that is an example of something that just naturally sort of evolves in terms of the plan. And as I say, that is understandable and indeed desirable, because writing a plan at the start of the year which is presented and approved is never going to be that is never going to represent those areas of highest risk when we start to get to the midpoint of the year, which is obviously the situation we're in. So I don't have any concerns that I need to bring to your attention. Thank you.
Can I ask you to read out the recommendations and see if we agree with the recommendations? On page 91.
So, Chair, if I may clarify, it was the recommendation, the internal audit report, if members could agree those recommendations to the item that Laura's just presented, and then I was going to ask if you could go back to item 4 and just make sure you were comfortable and content to agree those recommendations. So if we can deal with item 5 first, Chair, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Are members happy with the recommendations on page 91?
Agree, Chair.
All agree, Jen? Thank you.
And then on agenda item 4, the recommendations are set out. I'll just get the page number for you, forgive me. Page 6, thank you, Lisa. Are members content with the recommendations on page 6?
Support them, Chair.
Thank you.
That's really helpful, thank you, Chair.
Right. Fraud update. Can I invite Laura to present us the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. So this report is an annual culmination, really, of all the work that we do on fraud during the year, and we notify that to you within the internal audit update reports that you receive at each of these meetings. A couple of things that I would draw to your attention on this report is that since the last meeting we've undertaken the annual self-assessment against the CIPFA Code of Practice. That is sort of one of the main standard documents against which fraud arrangements should be evaluated. We've undertaken that piece of work, and generally it was positive, but it has identified a few areas that we are seeking to develop, and one of those is about really developing the counter-fraud strategy, and that is about bringing together a number of strands of activity that are already happening, but also increasing the focus on fraud risk and the assessment of fraud risk across the organisation. So that is something that I've been having conversations with the senior management team about, really getting much more focused on our significant fraud risks and our responses to those. So that is really a focus for my team in terms of facilitating that work and ensuring that that work happens and that it's encapsulated within that strategy. I would also draw to your attention the proactive fraud work that we've undertaken during the year, and I would also draw to your attention the reactive fraud work that we haven't undertaken during the year. There haven't been any allegations brought to my attention during the year to date. It's obviously some of the year still to go, so there may still be something that emerges. But I think one of the things that we do need to do as an organisation is to continue to focus on fraud awareness and make sure that we are encouraging people who may want to blow the whistle, for example, that they understand the process that sits behind that, how they can go about doing that, and understanding the protections that will be afforded to them if they do so. So again, that is one of the focuses of attention, and recently as part of Fraud Awareness Week, which was last week, International Fraud Awareness Week was last week, we focused on doing an awareness campaign across the organisation which highlighted a number of those issues. What sorts of things should we be looking out for? How should we report fraud? What should I be thinking about if I am contemplating blowing the whistle, etc. So those are the key points of the report, but I'm very happy to take any questions.
James?
Laura, you mentioned about fraud awareness. Do you believe that there's enough training in place for everyone across the combined authority in relation to fraud awareness, and that it's at a high enough standard? And do you believe that people are taking proper ownership of fraud risks within the organisation?
Thank you. We provide an e-learning module which gives a basic introduction to fraud awareness for all staff, and we encourage all staff to complete that training. I have to say the take-up of that has been a little bit patchy, and part of Fraud Week last week was about trying to raise the profile of that training and ensure that people are aware of its existence and the obligation to undertake it. But there is still some work to do on that front, I think. The other thing that is in front of you today, which I didn't mention previously, if you'll forgive me, is the suite of counter-fraud protocols. So those are all of the documents that sit around the process. So we've got a whistleblowing protocol, we've got a fraud, bribery and corruption protocol, etc., etc. So all of those documents are also widely available for staff to guide them in terms of what they should be aware of and what they should do should they have a suspicion. I think it's very much work in progress with the organisation in terms of embedding some of these approaches. A lot of it exists, but I think we need to bring some of it together. And I think part of that will happen when we go through this more focused exercise of really understanding what the fraud risks are that the organisation faces. As I say, I think it's all there, but it is just about putting the pieces of the jigsaw together.
Thank you. Any more questions? Oh, sorry, Miss Joyce.
Thank you, Chair. I know you did mention that you hadn't been made aware of anything particular, but you know, have there been any SARS raised, anything to do with money laundering, anything to do with the HMRC, or even police intervention that you may have felt was going to happen? I mean, is there a procedure? I mean, going pretty much into what James has just talked about. I mean, a little bit disappointed that that particular e-course isn't actually mandatory, given the nature and the weight. In fairness, I'm sure you'd wish it was. But I'm just wondering, do we ever get to the point where we instruct raise a SAR or anything like that with regards to something internally that you will have suspicions about? Thank you.
Yes, I think it's very much a two-way process. So obviously part of the process is receiving complaints, suspicions, reactively, but obviously we also do our proactive audit work. So if we were to come across anything there that we felt was in contravention of any laws, regulations, etc., then obviously we would take action in line with that, which obviously would usually start with an internal investigation. If it was to be something along the lines of money laundering, we do have an anti-money laundering protocol, and I'm the money laundering reporting officer, so I would make any reports that were necessary on that front. There hasn't been any of those instances in the year to date.
Are there any more questions? Jean?
Thank you, Chair. Just a question, Laura. In the cover report at 2.3, we've got the paragraph on the role of internal audit, and there isn't an awful lot there about the role of management in fraud, which is key, but it is in the protocol, so it's set out quite clearly there. And then you go on to talk about engagement across the organisation at paragraph 3.6 in the cover, which again is key. And in your opinion, do you think that engagement is really there? Do you see that with the management across the organisation, that there is that, you know, developing awareness and take-up of training and so on?
Thank you. I think it's developing, yes, and I think my conversations with the senior management team have been very much in that light. It's been very much about saying internal audit can help you, we can support you, we can facilitate a lot of this work, we can do a lot of the doing, but the corporate culture around fraud and the tone and the leadership around that has to come from senior management. And I think we're starting to have those conversations, and they've been very positive, and I think senior management are very much engaged, and it's part of that journey towards that, and really getting the clarity of understanding that that senior management really have that role to play, excuse me, I think is going to be key going forward. But my discussions with senior management have been very emphatic around that, and that's happened only in the last week or so. So I think the other thing is that in the forthcoming fraud and corruption strategy, that point is made very, very clear. So at the moment it's a little bit implied, but I think the forthcoming strategy will make that much more plain.
Are there any more questions? Right, can I ask you if you would agree to the recommendations set out on page 115?
Agree, Chair.
Thank you. We move on to item 7, risk management update. Can I invite Laura again?
Thank you, Chair. So this report again is one that you receive routinely and gives you a progress report on where we are with risk management activity across the organisation. And specifically this one talks about corporate risk, which you'll be familiar with. We've done quite a big exercise in terms of looking at the corporate risk register and structuring it around 5 themes, which are set out for you within the report. We've given a little bit of an update in terms of the review that we've undertaken with, again, with senior management, and that again is an ongoing process as obviously the world changes and risks change. Obviously this is not a static picture, this is very much moving and flexible, but progress in terms of meeting the actions continues in line with the timescales, which is really encouraging. We've extended the date on one of those, but we're still very much on track to deliver by the end of the calendar year, which is really good. I think sometimes we're a little bit over-ambitious with some of our dates. But the activity to continue to embed effective risk management continues, and I've set out for you within the report some of the things that we are doing, particularly, and we've talked a little bit today about e-learning and training, and that's one of the areas that with risk management we've particularly focused on. So we are just about to go live on a risk management e-learning package, but also with some face-to-face training as well for senior managers, really to make sure that particularly for new starters that we're capturing them and making sure that they are aware of their risk management responsibilities and that it's seen as intrinsic to the role, so that it isn't seen as something that is an add-on or something that sort of gets in the way of the day job, but is actually part and parcel of what we are trying to achieve in delivering the corporate plan. So the summary of the risks is attached for you. The other thing I should say is that in terms of the recommendations from the recent internal audit, because we do also audit risk management, was really encouraging. So we've now completed all of the recommendations arising from that. And as I say, in the appendix, there is a summary of those corporate risks for you, but I'm really happy to take any questions.
Councillor Joyce?
I'm awfully sorry. Just a query, and it's always something I was going to ask you at a previous meeting. If we find somebody has done something wrong internally, do we hold their line manager accountable in any way, shape or form because they haven't done the job that they're expected to do as a supervisory manager leader? Because some organisations do, which sort of encourages the whistleblowing to happen, but also encourages the managers to be a little bit more alert to such matters that you would need to on your radar.
I can't speak from experience, I'm afraid, but what I think would happen is that as part of the investigation, obviously we would look at not only the primary person who's in the frame, as it were, but we would also look at the people who sat around that. And clearly one of the questions that we would be asking as part of any investigation is, has the person's role and responsibilities been made clear to them? Have they been managed accordingly and appropriately? Have they fallen short, or if there have been any indications that they may have been up to something? Has that, in the vernacular, has that been adopted? Has it been acted upon? And I certainly know that within one piece of work that I've undertaken of an investigative type nature, so it wasn't where there was an actual fraud, so the law hadn't been broken, but there were certainly recommendations within that report that that was written by Internal Audit that gave some very clear messages to management about saying you have to take some responsibility for this, and that if you are not line managing a member of staff appropriately, you can reasonably expect that that might have consequences. So not in a fraudulent sense, but in an investigatory sense, certainly within the internal audit report that would come out.
Okay. Right, any more questions? No? Laura, thank you so much. You've done amazing there. Can we go on to item 8, please? Oh, sorry, Jean, I'm so sorry.
I was a bit slow to put my hand up, I do apologise. Just a quick question. At paragraph 2.4, Laura, it does talk about risk owners still needing to be confirmed, and I just wondered, you know, sort of what's the timescale for that, and are you confident, you know, again, are managers, you know, looking to allocate those risks?
Thank you. Yes, I've had a discussion with the LT this morning, and they've indicated that that's something that they're now going to do. I think the reason that they have held that in abeyance is because of a number of changes in the senior management structure. So we've had some vacancies and some interim appointments, etc. So now that we are looking to make permanent appointments, which are going to the Combined Authority on Friday, I think in light of that, we'll be in a position where we'll be able to assign responsibility permanently at that point.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask, do we agree for the recommendations set out on page 2001 of the report?
Agree, Chair.
Thank you. Laura, again, thank you so much for the report. Well done. Item 8, appointment of external audit. Can I invite Sarah Johnson, Assistant Director of Finance, to present the report, please? Sarah is also on Teams. Hi, Sarah.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair. This is a report which is seeking a steer from members of the committee as to how we would like to proceed with the appointment of our external auditors for the period for 5 years from 2023-24. Hopefully this will be something that members are quite familiar with from their own local authorities. But in summary, since the dissolution of the Audit Commission, all public sector bodies have been required to look to make their own arrangements for audit. And broadly speaking, there are 3 different options. We can do an individual procurement. We can seek to do a more local joint procurement, so whether that would be with constituent local authorities, or we can seek to opt into a national body. Now, members will recall last time we did this, we opted into the public sector appointments authority, which basically meant that we could opt into the national process. The paper as presented provides you with a fairly detailed appendices of the options and the pros and cons. But really, in summary, if I may, the option put forward last time, which was to proceed with the PSAA appointment, was done on the basis it was deemed to be the most cost-effective and resource-effective option, simply because the combined authority does not have the ability to monitor its own audit arrangements in the way that would be anticipated under the regulations. This is really brought to you for your comment and for a steer, as a paper will be taken to the combined authority to make a recommendation based on any comments or observations you may have. I'm happy to take any comments or questions, Chair.
Thank you, Sarah. Has anyone got any questions for Sarah? Yes, Councillor Joyce.
Thank you very much. I'm asking the question because I genuinely don't know the answer, but would it not have to be somebody who was not connected with any of the other authorities so that we didn't have any crossover, any conflict of interests? Am I talking rubbish there, in which case tell me, but it's just the job is so important, we need to make sure that it's absolutely beyond reproach, and I just wonder if that's a thought that you had.
If I may, Chair.
Yes, sir, please.
We tend to use the national body because that has the opportunity to go for a wider cohort. We know that there have been options in the past explored by organisations to appoint their own auditors, and there is a very, very limited pool, which is one of the problems we've got. So by stepping ourselves away from it, it's run by a body that has the ability to get that critical mass.
Thank you, Councillor Maloney.
Thanks, Chair. It's just to ask, if we did have the same external auditor as constituent authorities, would there not be separate actual auditors, the single members of staff for each authority, to avoid any conflict there? Would there be a Chinese wall, effectively? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you for the question. They do tend to have Chinese walls and members of audit teams, while they may be shared across different local authorities, will have to deal with them individually. They have to deal with those on the merits. What we find we have within the city region is a split. We don't all have the same external auditor. If I was to look across to the constituent arrangements within Greater Manchester, they do, and it is something that audit firms are used to managing, and they do have the protocols, and that would form part of the procurement process that they would need to go through.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any more questions? No. Sarah, thank you so much. Oh, I haven't done the recommendations, sorry. Can we agree the recommendations set out on page 227, please, of the report?
Agree, Chair.
Right, thank you. Once again, Sarah, thank you so much for your report. Right, number 8, any other business? There has been no items of urgent business submitted to the meeting. I would just like to say, Kat, and I hope you enjoyed your meeting, and Jean, and thank you for joining us. I hope to see you in person next time. Thank you. And can I also, this will be the last meeting before Christmas, so isn't it the audit? Yeah. Yeah. I wish you all a really happy Christmas and a safe journey home. Have a lovely time at Christmas. Thank you all again for joining us. Bye-bye.